Pastor Jamal Bryant, the man with a voice that could fill any room and a story that few truly knew. At 60 years old, he had dropped a truth so deep that people were left questioning everything they thought they understood about faith, leadership, and the quiet struggles that hide behind powerful smiles. You won't believe what he had been carrying all this time. For decades, Jamal Bryant stood in the middle of charisma and controversy. His sermons could light a fire in thousands of hearts, yet his name often burned in headlines that had nothing to do with the Bible. Let me tell you, this wasn't just a story about a pastor. It was about a man who had lived two lives, one for the crowd and one for the mirror. From his early days, Jamal seemed destined for greatness. Born to two respected ministers, the church was not just his Sunday stop. It was his home, his world. He grew up breathing sermons, singing hymns, and believing that faith could fix anything. People around him said there was something special, he felt trapped in the image he had built. Every rumor hurt, but pretending not to care hurt even more. He had to play a part. Strong, certain, unshaken. But the truth? He was tired of performing, tired of proving, tired of being everything to everyone. The pressure had built for years, and what no one knew was that his public strength had been hiding a private wound that had been bleeding for far too long. He later said something that explained it all. You can be celebrated for what you do in public, and still be broken by what happens in private. And that one line made people stop and think how many other leaders were walking through the same silent struggle. But here's where it gets interesting. This story wasn't about a scandal, not this time. The whispers had started long before anyone realized what they meant. People thought Jamal Bryant's biggest battles would stop performing. He once admitted that after preaching to thousands, he would go home, sit alone, and just stare into the dark. He said it felt like all the energy he gave to others left nothing for himself. He could make people feel God's presence, yet he couldn't feel it in his own life. This is where it gets interesting, because this wasn't about losing faith. It was about feeling forgotten by the faith he had dedicated his life to. He told himself to push through, to keep going, to smile a little wider, preach a little harder, pray a little longer. But no prayer seemed to quiet the noise in his head. The same voice that once gave others hope was now whispering to him, "You're running on empty." And what made this story different was how well he hid it. The world saw a man of strength, the one who always had the right words, but inside he was unraveling. He described it as living in two worlds, one where everyone looked up to him and another where he barely recognized himself. People thought his struggle was about fame or criticism, but the craziest part was that he wasn't fighting against others. He was fighting against himself. The more he tried to perform strength, the weaker he became. Every time he told people to trust God, he wondered why he couldn't feel that same trust anymore. He said the hardest part of ministry wasn't preaching or leading. It was pretending. Pretending to be fine when everything inside him was falling apart. Pretending that the joy in his voice matched the emptiness in his heart. Pretending that he was healed when he was still bleeding. It was during this time that he started to realize how dangerous that silence could be. The world celebrated his victories, but no one asked about his battles, and even if they had, he wasn't ready to answer. Pastors weren't supposed to admit weakness. Leaders weren't supposed to confess loneliness, so he kept sound, but a quiet knowing that stopped him cold. God didn't call him to perfection, he realized. God called him to surrender. That one realization changed everything. It wasn't about being flawless, it was about being honest. From that moment, Jamal began to understand that real strength didn't come from performing, it came from facing the truth he had long avoided. From that moment on, Jamal Bryant's life began to shift in ways that were both quiet and powerful. The man who has spent decades performing strength finally started living truth. You won't believe how freeing it felt for him to stop pretending. Let me tell you, this is how a man who had been lost inside himself began to find his way back. For the first time, he didn't stand behind a mask of confidence or charisma. He stood as Jamal Bryant, the man, wounded, tired, but finally honest. He began to speak openly about the struggles he had hidden for so long. He told people that it wasn't just the pressures of leadership that had weighed on him. It was the loneliness, the constant need to prove himself, and the fear that admitting pain would make him unworthy. But here's the shocking part. By admitting his truth, he didn't lose respect. People began to see him not as a flawed pastor, but as a real human being, someone they could relate to, someone who had been brave enough to face what so many others hid. The applause no longer mattered. The headlines no longer defined him. He had finally stopped performing and started living. Jamal explained that behind every sermon, behind every confident smile, There had been seasons when he felt completely disconnected from the very God he had spent his life preaching about. Yet facing that emptiness didn't destroy him. It reshaped him. Destiny took an unexpected turn when he realized that weakness was not failure and honesty was not defeat. He started embracing the parts of himself he had long ignored, the fear, the doubt, the exhaustion, and in doing so found a new kind of strength. The craziest part was that his vulnerability became a beacon for others. People who had silently struggled for years saw that even a pastor could be human, and even a leader could face brokenness. He shared that the greatest lesson he learned was that leadership didn't require perfection, it required truth. He said, "I've been living in pieces for a long time. Pieces of the pastor, pieces of the man, pieces of the father, pieces of the believer I used to be. And I'm finally ready to stop pretending those pieces don't matter." That honesty didn't make him weaker, it made him stronger. And this is how the story of Jamal Bryant transformed from controversy into inspiration. What makes the story different is that it shows the real cost of hiding pain and the extraordinary courage it takes to confront it. By finally surrendering, Jamal Bryant redefined what it meant to lead. He showed that faith is not about being perfect, success is not about always smiling, and strength is not about hiding struggles. He became a man who could preach hope, not just from